It's the fantasy playoffs. We got to get every decision right now. Here are 10 lessons that can help you make the right decisions in week 15. The first lesson is, I regret being too low on Jauan Jennings this week. If you go back before the Snow game and the Brandon Allen game, I was saying Jauan Jennings a strong start every week. And then, of course, Brandon Allen came into the mix. And then, of course, we had that Snow game. And it's hard sometimes after two really terrible games to look at a guy the same way. But we saw on Sunday, when everybody is healthy, when the weather is okay, Jauan Jennings is an absolute stud in fantasy this year. If you take out that Snow game and the Brandon Allen game, since Brandon Ayuk went out and Jauan Jennings was healthy, Jauan Jennings is the wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. Over that same stretch, Debo is the wide receiver 60. This is clearly the Jauan Jennings show here. It's basically Jauan Jennings and George Kittle, right? That is the passing game here for the 49ers. Jauan Jennings, rest of the season, looking like a stud, looking like a guy you have to have in your fantasy lineups. As long as it's Brock Purdy and there's no snow, Jauan Jennings should be great in your playoffs. And then the next lesson is, we have to buy into Tua being an every week, no doubt, start at the QB position. Since week 11, he is the QB2 in fantasy football behind only Josh Allen. And that's only because Josh Allen just had a 50-point game in week 14. He's second in passing yards over that stretch behind only Jameis Winston, and he's tied with Sam Darnold for the most touchdown passes since week 11. And unlike years past where the Dolphins have had to go like into New England in terrible weather, into Buffalo in terrible weather, they get a pretty nice playoff schedule this year. They play at Houston in week 15. That's in a dome. Then they get the 49ers at home. Now, they do have to travel to Cleveland in week 17, but as long as it isn't snowing, Tua should be fine. We saw in that cold weather game on Thanksgiving against Green Bay, he was fine, not worried about that anymore. So Tua looking like a guy you have to set and forget in your fantasy playoffs at the QB position. And the next lesson is, Chuba Hubbard is apparently inevitable this year. There are just certain things in life that are inevitable. You can't do anything about it. And apparently this year, it's Chuba Hubbard. Because right when it looked like Jonathan Brooks was going to start eating into his carries, eating into his pass-catching role, nope, very early in that game, Jonathan Brooks sadly suffered a non-contact injury on the same knee that he tore his ACL in college. This is a brutal, brutal blow for a young player like Jonathan Brooks, but it's a great thing for a guy like Chuba Hubbard because he once again was the absolute workhorse running back here. He played 76% of the snaps, but more importantly, he ran 78% of the routes. That is something he did not do the previous week with Jonathan Brooks eating into that. Chuba Hubbard looking like an every down, 3-down workhorse running back, and the Carolina Panthers have arguably the best schedule in the fantasy playoffs. They get the Cowboys, the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers. Fire Chuba up with confidence rest of the season. 2024 is just an inevitable year for Chuba Hubbard. And hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video or any of the videos or the live streams that we do, just ask you to take a quick second, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'd greatly appreciate it. The next lesson, if we didn't already know this yet, is that Kirk Cousins might absolutely be done, not only in fantasy, but in real life. Over the last 4 games, he has 8 interceptions and 0 touchdowns. I'm going to say that again to make sure you understand that this wasn't a typo. I'm not busting out the wrong stats here. 8 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. The only reason why Kirk Cousins is even still the starter of the Falcons is because they are in the playoff hunt. I think if they were out of the playoff hunt, he would absolutely be benched for Michael Penix, the rookie here. But he absolutely should not be starting in any fantasy football lineups. I don't care if you're in a 2 QB league, a 3 QB league, a Superflex league, whatever it is. I don't care what your QB scoring is. You cannot start Kirk Cousins the rest of the season. And the Falcons don't even have a bad playoff schedule, but I don't even care. Not to mention, once they are out of the playoff race, which is actually looking more and more likely as the weeks go on, they probably will bench him and see what they have with the rookie. Kirk Cousins shouldn't even be rostered in fantasy rest of the season, sadly. And honestly, I don't even know how much more Kirk Cousins we're going to see in his career. The next big lesson from week 14 is Jaxon Smith-Njigba now the Seattle Seahawks #1 wide receiver? Since DK Metcalf returned from injury in week 11, he leads the team in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Now, I will say over that stretch, DK Metcalf does have slightly more targets, and he does have a higher first read percentage, but DK Metcalf does not look fully healthy to me. When I watch the games and I see DK Metcalf out there, this does not look like the same explosive, freakish athlete I am used to seeing. I just don't think DK Metcalf is healthy. Remember dealing with an MCL sprain in the knee. I just don't know if we're going to see a healthy DK Metcalf this year. And that means Jaxon Smith-Njigba is probably going to have to be the wide receiver 1 in this Seattle offense. After looking like a total bust for half the season, looks like he may be coming on at the right time in your fantasy playoffs. So I think if I have to choose one of these guys rest of the season, I sadly have to go with JSN. The next lesson is, thankfully, it looks like Tyrone Tracy is back as the Giants' workhorse running back after being kind of like punished, I guess, for his fumbling issues. Absolutely took over this backfield in week 14. Got all but 2 of the carries here. Out-carried Devin Singletary 16-2. More importantly, ran 66% of the routes. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't have the best schedule in the fantasy playoffs. They got the Ravens in week 15. That is not great for running backs. Then they get the Falcons in week 16, which, yeah, they're a bad defense, but they're much worse against the pass than they are against the run. Then he does get the Colts in week 17, but at least we can feel good about Tyrone Tracy being the clear lead back here in New York. Now, of course, he's also hampered by this terrible offense. Not going to get him a lot of chances to score, but this time of year, there aren't going to be many running backs getting the kind of workload and receiving work that Tyrone Tracy is, and he's got that explosive home run ability, so you can certainly do worse than Tracy in your fantasy playoffs. And whether you're in your fantasy playoffs or not, you should at least be taking advantage of the pick'ems on Underdog. It's a ton of fun, a great way to get your fantasy action in, whether you're in it or not. And this week, if you're new to Underdog, you're going to get this free pick. Brock Purdy just needs 1 yard. You win that pick. Just make sure you join using promo code ENDGAME, because not only will that get you that Brock Purdy free pick, but also up to $1,000 in bonus cash that you can use right away. The next lesson is, it's 2024 and somehow Adam Thielen is still a thing, and I guess in the fantasy playoffs, he's going to be a thing because, as I talked about with Chuba Hubbard, they have a fantastic playoff schedule. In week 14 against that tough Eagles defense, 9 catches, 102 yards on 11 targets. Look, I did not think Adam Thielen was going to come through in week 14. He did. Why can't he come through the rest of the season with this fantastic schedule? Bryce Young looks actually pretty good, at least good enough to support Adam Thielen. He still gets a ton of targets in this offense. He still somehow has touchdown upside. Adam Thielen looking like a set and forget wide receiver that you have to have in your fantasy lineups in the fantasy playoffs. I can't believe I'm saying that in 2024, but here we are. And it doesn't look like you need any Jets running backs in your lineup for the fantasy playoffs. We finally got our first look at this Jets backfield without Breece Hall in week 14. And if you had been holding on to Braylon Allen all year waiting for this moment, man, were you disappointed, because you had to watch Isaiah Davis go in for a touchdown. But even worse, it wasn't just that he scored, because sometimes random running backs score and like your guy doesn't score. No, this was an absolute split backfield. Braylon Allen had 37 snaps. Isaiah Davis had 36. They each had 16 opportunities in this game. They ran almost the exact same number of routes. This is a split backfield without Breece Hall. And if Breece Hall is able to play in week 14, this is probably just going to be a committee backfield you want to completely avoid. Even against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I can't say any of these guys are more than an RB2 who needs a touchdown to have real upside, because this backfield is just a mess, as is this Jets offense. And I sadly don't feel any better about the Eagles' passing attack. What is going on here? A.J. Brown now has 5 of his last 7 games outside the top 30 wide receivers. He's only gone over 15 fantasy points twice in his last 7 games. And even Devonta Smith, who came back from that hamstring and saved his day with a touchdown, really did absolutely nothing outside of that score. The issue here is the Eagles just do not have to throw the ball. Since week 4, Jalen Hurts has never even thrown 30 attempts in a game, and he's thrown for 25 or fewer attempts in all but one of those games. Over that stretch, his highest passing yard game is only 236. With the run game being so effective, the defense being so good, the Eagles just don't need to lean on the passing game, and nothing about their schedule makes me think they're going to have to lean on the passing game. They finished the season against the Steelers, the Commanders, and the Cowboys. I doubt any of those offenses are going to force the Eagles to throw the ball 30 plus times. Sadly, it's looking like A.J. Brown might go down as one of the biggest busts this year, and I don't think he is a no doubt must start in your fantasy playoffs. And then the final lesson here is the 49ers running back. It doesn't even matter who it is, right? We saw Jordan Mason at the start of the year was one of the leading rushers in the entire NFL. Then CMC came back. Of course, he got hurt. And of course, in the same game, somehow Jordan Mason also got hurt. So then rookie Isaac Guerrero was thrust into the starting role, was having a monster game before leaving early in the fourth quarter with a foot injury, because of course, he's a 49er running back. I guess in 2024, if you're a 49er running back, you have to get injured. It's just another inevitable thing, kind of like Chuba Hubbard. So now we're probably looking at Patrick Taylor on a short week against the Los Angeles Rams. And guess what? Patrick Taylor is nothing special as a runner, but he's going to be effective because he's in this scheme, in this running scheme for the 49ers. No, I don't think he has the upside of CMC or Jordan Mason or even Isaac Guerrero. But if you need a running back this week, he's at worst an RB2 with touchdown upside, because again, he's a 49ers running back. It doesn't matter who it is, they're going to be effective. But it does matter that you win this week, and we got you covered with everything you're going to need. Start sits coming, booms, everything you need, you're going to find it in our Week 15 playlist, which is right here.